Okay. Harry McLaren.
Hello.
Good evening, Harry. How are you?
Really good, thank you. How are you?
Not so bad. Bit tired, as you might expect. Um, give us a little bit of an intro, Harry, if you don't mind. Tell us who you are, what you do, how you feel your day.
Happily. So yeah, Harry McLaren. I work as a product lead for detection and response at Adama. It's a Scotland headquartered cybersecurity consultancy. My kind of history with them is they took me straight out of university, so I moved to Scotland to pursue a degree in cybersecurity and digital forensics. Worked in a SOC initially as a senior analyst and incident responder, and then for the last 6 years I've been doing security engineering and consultancy, mostly around SOC tooling, processes, that kind of thing. What makes me tick? That's a really interesting one. I guess problem solving fundamentally. I love solving problems or taking apart a problem for someone else to solve.
Cool. Awesome. SOC is something that I'm particularly interested in, and you know this, because it's something that I'm trying to bring into the company I work for and get up and running. We're kind of early days. We're dabbling with tech at the moment, so we're not really looking at it too much from an analysis point of view and people point of view. We're seeing what we can see, and then we're going to work out the processes and the people that we need around it. But it'd be really cool if you could just give us a little bit of an insight into not quite a Blur song, but SOC life.
Sure.
So yeah, what does a day, an average day in the SOC look like?
So I guess I'll split it into two. I'll say what a day in what I would call a more traditional SOC is, and then what I think a more future-looking day should be. So
Yeah, cool.
your average security operations center or security ops team, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a SOC, it could just be a few security analysts sitting in a room. Fundamentally, you're there to triage security events that occur within your environment to try and work out whether or not they impact your business and if you need to take action. So that can be everything from, just literally monitoring individual log files and alerting tools to, monitoring Jira queues, ServiceNow queues. And then when you get an alert through your tooling, you then do an investigation, you triage it, and you try to work out the impact or the severity. It's often very manual in that kind of more legacy SOC world. There's often a lot of churn, as they would call it, or ticket churn. And you, in some respects, are a little bit like a glorified help desk in that kind of low maturity SOC. It can be quite soul destroying. When I did it initially, I got RSI just from literally copy and pasting screenshots into spreadsheets to prove that the false positives weren't in fact impactful.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, it can be a really great place to start in InfoSec because your cost of entry is usually quite low. You don't necessarily have to have a degree. As long as you're relatively technical and capable of following processes, it can be a really simple way to get into the industry.
Yeah.
But I think that what it doesn't often do is give you a lot of value for your work in that low mature SOC. You often aren't necessarily bringing much value to the organization. What's called your true positive rate is often in very low percent. So you might, for every 1,000 tickets or events that you investigate, maybe only one or two of them will actually turn out to be incidents, which you will then often not even be involved in remediating. And that can be a little bit soul destroying.
And you hear about that a lot. Well, I do anyway. This idea that you're kind of like a burnt out shell inside an operation center staring at Kibana dashboards day in, day out.
Yeah.
And like you say, you get 1,000 events, one or two could actually turn out to be something, air quotes, exciting. And you hear as a consequence of that, or I do, that it leads to quite a lot of burnout in the profession. And also as a consequence of that, you hear people leaving the profession entirely.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that more mature SOC or that more modern SOC should really be a place that takes those lessons learned from what essentially are decades of, NOC, SOCs, help desks, things that run in similar ways, but possibly different objectives, and really try and use the people process technology approach and maturing across the board to step up, to lower that noise ratio, to use computers to do what computers are really good at, and that is follow very programmatic instruction. And I think that's where like security orchestration comes in. And so you then take all of that churn, all of those things that you do the exact same thing to day in and day out, and you go, well, wait a minute, I can just program the computer to take those actions for me
Yeah.
and to only bring me into it when I need to make a decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where you start to bring that maturity and that control back into your SOC, because then they're taking action on things that are important and allowing the computer to do the orchestration component of gathering contextual information and so on.
Yeah. So it's clear that human intelligence is incredibly important for making those judgments at the end of the day. What part, I mean, you've kind of answered the question, I guess, but in your experience, what part does tooling play, and how important is it to get the tooling right? You know, tuning out the crap and getting, minimizing the white noise and that kind of stuff.
So I think tooling is very important, but it's no more important than your people or your process. I think
Okay.
all three are equal partners and foundations for a good team to work. And a SOC has to be fundamentally built in technology. There's no way to address this problem manually through Word documents or Excel files. It doesn't scale, and it's soul destroying. The tooling is vastly important, but if it's poorly implemented, if it's poorly planned, if you don't understand the problem you're trying to solve, all you end up with is a black box solution in a corner that does nothing and actually drives no value.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Did you find in your kind of meanderings around SOC, I'm cheating a little bit because you and I have had a couple of conversations about this stuff behind the scenes, but did you find that you were inundated with kind of snake oil vendors that had got a solution to the problem that you don't even have, or we've got a thing that will just do all the work for you, and all you guys have got to do is just look at the little things that get spat out?
Yeah, definitely. And I say this with the full knowledge that fundamentally I do work for a consultancy. So,
Sure.
I'm not your average SOC experience, because I did work for that third party that, does sell or resell products and is a system integrator and so on. But I think that's also helped direct my approach to technical sales. So when I get asked by a customer, oh, why should we buy this solution? It's not because it's snake oil. It's not because it's going to solve your problems when you turn it on. It's understanding the problem you're trying to solve and then making sure that whatever solution, so the solution is made up of people, processes, and technology.
Yeah.
And if you implement that solution correctly, then the technology actually is worth the money paying for it. But if you're just buying a piece of software and thinking that instantly your SOC's now going to be really mature, you're going to, detect all the latest APTs and only need one SOC analyst to run everything, it's just quite foolish. And I think any vendor that tries to, sell that narrative without really talking about the difficulty of establishing, true orchestration, for example, or in inverted commas, next gen SIEM, next gen SOC, all the various tools that leverage components of AI, brilliant, that's awesome, but it's only another indicator, it's only another tool to try and help you with noise. It's not going to be this, oh great, we've implemented some standard deviation across all of our searches. Well, great, that's awesome, it's a really powerful thing to do, but it's not going to fix everything.
Yeah. I mean, in my head, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because you're a few streets ahead of me in this, but the kind of four basic pillars in my mind around security operations are vulnerability management, threat management, endpoint detection, recovery, etc., and probably incident response. So I guess the saying is it never pays to put all your eggs in one basket. So the question, I suppose, is it sensible to put a blending of different providers, different technologies, or are there actually organizations out there where you can just go and say, right, give me a turnkey solution, let them worry about it?
Again, I think it's probably both. So I think there are platforms out there that can meet many of your security requirements in a relatively turnkey type scenario, especially for smaller businesses. So some of Google's, Microsoft's, and Amazon's platforms, if you've gone all in or built yourself in the cloud, then you can leverage a lot of those vendors' own technologies to deliver significant returns within your detection and response program. Your more traditional or legacy IT environments, you're always going to have a blend, because you're going to have so many different technologies you need to interface with, different operating systems, different environments. You're going to be locked in by the regulator in some points, so you may not be able to use certain technologies in certain places due to import-export laws. When you start going global, it gets even more complicated because of things like data sovereignty. So I've consulted on architecture for a global bank. They're in I think 130 countries, and they have 68 CISOs dotted around the world that own different parts of that bank or the subsidies of those banks and so on. And so you're just not going to convince all of those business owners to sign off on one tool to rule them all. It's just not going to happen. They're all going to have their preferences, their relationships in the industry. But it comes down to that fundamental question of what's the problem you're trying to solve, and then ensuring that your overall solution will help you solve that problem.
Yeah. So I want to, where do you see the future for SOC and SIM and that kind of thing? Because if we take a look back, it was very much focused on network security, whereas now we're moving to things like beyond trust, or as I think beyond trust, software-defined perimeters and that kind of thing. The whole thing has changed. So does a SOC still play a vital part in that? If so, what kind of role will it play?
So I think it still plays an absolutely critical role, and that is to be that single point, that wheel and spoke type approach where yes, it needs to learn new skills. It needs to really understand the pace of business and the velocity. So understanding continuous integration, continuous delivery of software, of changes to the environment, configuration as code, the capability of pushing out software changes to the security tooling multiple times a day, and so on. Like really, I think security operations is quite behind a lot of the people in AppSec, where we don't push new code to our teams generally once an hour. It's maybe once a month or every 6 weeks. There are companies that take 6 months to upgrade their software on their endpoints or pull down the latest patch information. Might take a 24-hour SQL job. None of that's fit for purpose anymore. The velocity of the business and the velocity of the attackers that are trying to circumvent these controls, it's too fast, they're too big, there's too many of them. So we have to adapt, or those SOCs will essentially fail to do their job by helping keep their customers safe.
Yeah, I totally agree. I guess SOC's got to be much like the rest of us, adapt or go away.
Exactly. And really freeing them up and coming back to that kind of so security orchestration and response automation, etc. Those type of things are designed to start enabling your analysts, your security operations specialists, to put their time and their skills into the important parts, things like threat hunting, the continuous improvement of the systems and processes they've established, rather than dealing with that ticket churn. So I think embedding more engineers in SOCs is really important, who can actually improve the SOC itself, rather than improving other areas of the business, but focusing on the SOC and its tools is really good.
Yeah, so really interesting. So let's assume that it all begins with asset management, right? So if you don't know what you have, then you can't protect it. You certainly can't monitor it, and you can't report on vulnerabilities and things that you find. So assume we have a baseline CMDB, config management database, for those that don't know what that is, which forms a fairly important part of IT service management, and that allows you to do change management, incident management, ticketing, etc., etc. Where would you start after that? So you've got a broad understanding of what your asset base is, and in the case of my organization, it's pretty bloody huge because we're an ISP, right? So we've got internal core network infrastructure that we care about, and we've got ISP infrastructure we care about, and then we've got customer infrastructure that we care about. So what comes next in your head, Harry? Is it vulnerability management? Is it threat management? I'm assuming that you can't do it all at the same time.
Totally right. You definitely can't do it all at the same time, and it comes down to understanding the business need. And I would say there's two main approaches. You either essentially pick a framework off the shelf and go, we're going to try and get to maturity level 1 out of 5 in all these areas. So the CIS computer controls, for example, they're a really good place to start if you're just looking to pull something off a shelf, because you can essentially use that framework to say foundational controls are these. It gives you a maturity model that you can apply quite simply, and it gives you very clear guidance on the types of things you should do. Even covers CMDB. It's the first CIS control. There's know what you have, The second one is, and of your assets, what's actually on them, what do they do, before you can start protecting them. The other approach, and I think what I would say is probably will get you to a better overall risk posture improvement faster, is threat modeling, is actually considering who your adversary is and what you're trying to protect, and then working out what can go wrong, because you will never implement every security control possible. You will never reach full maturity across the board. We know that perfect doesn't exist, especially within security, because the landscape changes faster than we can. But if you at least model up front some of those big risk areas, and you're an ISP, for example, okay, well, what is your crown jewel? What is the one thing that your entire business requires to run from a technological perspective? Obviously, if you're branching outside of cybersecurity and going into information security, then you've got to look at the business with a different lens and start to think about things like business continuity. You've got to think about information security and so on and so forth. But if you're just talking about cyber, then you're going to want to say things like, where are our key databases? What are our key mechanisms for managing our technology? You're a technology provider, an ISP. It provides technological solutions to customers. How do you best protect those assets against adversaries that will try and take them from you?
Yeah, absolutely right. And it goes back to a point I've made a couple of times in previous talks in Beacon 1. It's about risk, isn't it, at the end of the day? And a risk at the board level is company closure, or directors going to jail, or being fined, and all that kind of stuff. And then you kind of peel it back from there to what may precipitate that happening. And obviously then you're down to things like data loss, or a really bad phishing attack that causes ransomware, or direct financial loss. And then you kind of go from business risk and continuity to information security risk down to cyber risk.
Yeah.
Because obviously the three things link together. But it's a really good point. Really good point.
Do you think those things should be documented in things such as pen test reports? So often with pen test reports, you get a block. This is a critical, but no reasoning behind why that's critical and how that can impact the company.
Mm-hmm. So pen testing in particular, and I mean this in what I would call quite a narrow description, is primarily used as a point in time basic technical threat assessment against a particular asset or set of assets. It serves a purpose, but it shouldn't be used to drive your strategy. It should be used to prove your compliance to a set of controls. What I think is better is a wider security testing function, where you are constantly looking at the different components of your business and then testing them against a framework to say, well, how weak is that control set? How easy is it to get around it? And then where appropriate, using obviously broader pen testing like red teaming to actually then test the business, not just the technical components they're built on.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Pen testing in my head is an assurance piece. So you've done what you said you were going to do, right? And you've architected, designed, built, and now you're operating a thing, whether it's a network or infrastructure or anything. Are you doing what you said you were going to do?
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're going to look at different businesses in different ways, because your more legacy businesses that are built on massive sprawling technology stacks and so on, they're going to have so many that what's the word I'm looking for? The landscape, the opportunity to attack it is very broad. Whereas if you have something that you have built in security unit testing, for example, as part of your CI/CD chain, you can test your compliance to security policies because they're defined as code.
Yeah.
You can ensure that no S3 bucket is ever allowed to be made public because you have a unit test that tests for that configuration being present.
Agreed. Yeah. And
then not allow it to get merged into master and pushed into production if it's not there, or if it doesn't have a valid exception or whatever. That's a more modern approach to those kind of things. And at that point, you need less pen testing, because what you simply do is audit the system's compliance to your security policy, which is defined as code.
Yeah, completely agree. Couldn't agree more. Listen, Harry, that flew by really fast.
Has indeed.
Yeah, but it's been awesome, and I always enjoy talking to you. And thank you for the welcome you gave us up at Cyber Scotland Connect in September.
Pleasure. It's always good to have you.
Enjoyed your company up there as well. Harry McLaren, everyone. Thank you very much, mate, for your time, and all the best. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and thanks for everything you've done with BeerCon 1. Congratulations, guys. I think it's been an incredible success.
Thanks, man. We love your support. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.